Welcome back to Free Media. I'm Robby Soave.
And I'm Amber Duke.
Well, many conservatives, including the Daily Wire's Matt Walsh, criticized the Department of Homeland Security for not thinking America first when it announced that FEMA would deny emergency relief funding to cities that participate in the boycott of Israel.
DHS is now saying that there is no change in policy and emergency funds will be released irrespective of any political litmus test. This was a very quick turnaround. So the first draft of the order did state this caveat about supporting Israel in order to receive emergency relief funding, and then the second draft after online backlash was mysteriously gone.
Yeah, like, what were you saying? We never said that. It's out there. Yeah.
Which was the right thing to do.
Right.
Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt actually retweeted someone who was like, wow, it's gone now. So I'm pretty sure the White House saw people in the president's base getting angry about this and realizing that this was probably not worth the squeeze. I don't know why this was included in the first place. It was really bizarre. Why are we tying assistance for American people based on how they feel about a foreign country?
I know. It's so weird. I mean, they're all doing, Randy Fine is over there, I think.
He's a sick
in
freak.
Israel right now. Yeah. Lusting for the death of children, tweeting openly that he could starve them all. Really appalling stuff. I don't why is this an issue that should affect whether people who need emergency funds get them? And I am not for a boycott of Israel, the companies. I always think the boycott whole thing is a little weird. I can understand boycotting like an actual government whose policies you don't agree with, but the boycott tends to apply just to firms.
Yeah, they're like, don't buy
Israel.
Starbucks or McDonald's because there is a McDonald's in Israel.
Right, which is not
idiotic.
And that's not just for Israel. I was against the Cuban embargo. I'm against sanctions on Russia because none of these things seem to work to me. We don't get regime change. We don't get more favorable policies. We just get the people suffer more, and it doesn't really change anything. If you want to do your own personal boycott against any government, that's absolutely your right, and maybe is morally called for in some cases. I'm not sure just boycotting someone who happens to be in the country that has a government we disagree with is a good idea to address anything. Nor do I necessarily think a municipality, a city, or a state should really be doing that. I would vote against that as a resident of the state. I would not want my city council deciding who we contract with, probably based on politics to that extent, other than North Korea or something. I would just want them to get the best deal for the city. But all that being said, I don't think the federal government has any business weighing in and saying, yeah, we're going to withhold funding for the pretty key funding. If the federal government's going to do anything in terms of, helping in these kinds of crises or emergencies, it seems like this is bad.
Yeah, I suppose the only question that's sort of hitting at the back of my mind as I think about this is, what do you think about withholding funds from cities that don't cooperate with federal immigration enforcement?
Right.
Because that's, I guess, a similar lever of power in that Trump doesn't want to give funding to sanctuary cities or counties. And how does that analogous to not giving funding to cities or municipalities that protest Israel?
And I don't care if they're consistent with a lot of federal immigration law, because I disagree with federal immigration law. But Niall and I were talking about this on Rising today, and I tried to come up with some, because he said what you said and what I said, they should just not deny the funding. And then I tried to come up with some example whereby, well, what if, it was a conservative municipality that was not going to work with Black-owned businesses in South Africa because of the South African, the violence against white farmers that liberal and mainstream people don't recognize as even existing. If it was, racist contracting, would you still support the federal government giving them the funding regardless? And he said yes. He said, the federal government should just not withhold the funding, which I'm okay.
Okay, at least he's ideologically consistent.
I can certainly imagine an Obama or Biden administration, maybe not withholding disaster funding, but certainly they'd withhold education funding if we don't have schools under the Title IX policy they want.
And Biden sued Georgia over its voting bill because they didn't want political activists handing out T-shirts and water in line because it could engender support for a particular party.
I mean, the point being the federal government has long done things like this. I mean, the whole, the drinking age, if we go back long enough, was accomplished by the federal government, I believe under the Reagan administration, withholding funding for highways unless states changed the drinking age, made it higher. That almost, I think, kicks off this more modern use of how federal funds can be used to influence policies without any sort of explicit orders from the federal government. That is, in my libertarian view, generally not good, even though sometimes it will be done in a manner where I like the outcome, sometimes it will be done in a manner where I don't like the outcome, but I think it's probably bad practice regardless to have policy being done on behalf of states and cities at the federal level without anyone actually voting necessarily for that policy.
Yeah, I think the only difference with the sanctuary city issue is that there is an argument that they are violating the law. And so I think it would be fair to say that you can withhold federal funds if states are not following the law. Now, if they just have a different policy preference than you, that's a different question.
I mean, it is true that the Supreme Court has basically said on immigration that you can't have a state can't have a separate immigration policy from the federal government, which did make a lot of conservatives annoyed in some cases because Arizona and Texas wanting to have more strict immigration policies than the federal government, and the Supreme Court said absolutely not, which moves it into the realm of it just being a federal issue. More free media right after this.